Hey there guys, this is Richard, your host, with another marvelous video. I thought it'd be a terrific moment to examine the very extensive narrative of the entire Dead Space universe, which was left open after the series' final installment, Dead Space 3, was released in 2013. I decided that this would be a great time to do it because a remake of the 2008 survival horror classic Dead Space is scheduled to debut in early 2023. In order to make this chronology fit together, I had to use some artistic license in a few instances where different media depict the same events occurring at the same time. I've generally tried to keep the various mediums apart, but their story arcs may occasionally cross. I apologize in advance for this. If you're only here for the games, make sure to scroll ahead in the video to get to what you're interested in, because I'll be beginning with a little extra material, including digging deep into the first novel that obviously won't have much visuals. Without further ado, this is everything you could need to know about the Dead Space franchise. Bring on the drag tentacle, please! Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
It spoke to me. What did it say, Isaac? What did it say to you, Isaac? Isaac, can you hear me?
Dead Space was originally produced in 2008. It may have just appeared to be another survival horror game, but at the time, it had the edge over others because it was also sci-fi. A few of the first ideas for the game included escaping a space prison, and one of the names they came up with was Rancid Moon. What's most interesting about this game is that it was basically a personal project for Glenn Schofield. So, Glenn and a few other developers got together and started brainstorming and creating a 10 to 15 minute demo so they could get proper backing for the project. Given that this was something they'd all been talking about for years and was a big interest to everyone involved, they eventually got greenlit. This game wasn't all jump scares though. This was a game that made you not want to go forward without finding out more about the story. The storyline is very compelling, and a lot of focus was put into making the game very story-driven. This managed to suck in the player and hold their attention and curiosity, leaving them constantly yearning as well as terrified to learn more. The next most important aspect of the game, in my opinion, was sound design. As Glenn mentioned in an interview, if you take a horror movie and only listen to the audio, it's scary. But if you only watch the movie without the audio, it's not scary at all. The importance he laid on sound design is one of the things that definitely added to the success of the franchise. At the same time, it laid the foundation for atmospheric horror, which the industry would later take heavy inspiration from for years to come. Prologue: The Dead before Dead Space. Dead Space Martyr. A man is attacked by a huge beast in a spherical chamber as the novel begins. By dodging between its arms as it charges and ripping apart the creature's abdomen, he manages to briefly take the upper hand. But after rendering him helpless, the beast lifts him up and rips him in half, murdering him. The focus of the book then changes to geophysicist Michael Altman, who is employed by a Chicxulub field lab. In Chicxulub, he and his partner James Field find a gravitational anomaly emanating from the crater's center. They spend days trying to pinpoint the precise origin of the abnormality without success. In contrast to Field, who gave up, Altman makes the decision to learn more about the abnormality. He then decides to talk to other scientists in the area about the crater. One day, he receives a call from an enigmatic man instructing him to meet him in a bar that evening at 8 o'clock. Altman decides to go home because he believes it to be a joke. He tells his lover, Ada Chavez, an archaeologist who works in Chicxulub, about his day when he gets home. She then informs him about all the strange things happening at her place of employment. How, when she inquired further about the Tale of the Devil, a folk tale that is said to be located in the crater's center, people in the town were reluctant to answer. She adds that the name of this town, Chicxulub, translates to Devil's Tale. He understood that the crater contains more than simply an oddity. He makes the decision to meet the enigmatic man at the pub in the hopes of learning more. Charles Hammond introduces himself as he arrives. Hammond comes to the conclusion that he does not believe that whatever is in the crater center was created by humans. Why did Hammond come to him? Altman wonders. Because he was making inquiries when no one else would, he claims. He believes that everyone is being sold, except for Altman. Altman departs after their talk, and Hammond continues to remain and drink for a bit before leaving the bar when he realizes how late it is. He experiences a severe headache and continual whispering while roaming the streets. When three guys suddenly approach him and want to interview him, he begins to lose his cool a little. He flees because he fears that they would kill him for speaking. The three men pursue him and encircle him. One of them receives a wrist injury after Hammond slashes them with a pocket knife. In a fit of mania, Hammond cuts his own throat as the murmurs and headaches grew worse. Surprised by this, the three guys claim that all they wanted to do was bring him in for interrogation. When Dredger Corps gets to the crater, it sends a sub down to look into the anomaly's location. There, they dig down, and the two pilots, Hennessy and Dantec, grow increasingly irritated with horrible headaches. Hennessy has visions of Shane, his deceased brother. Dantec is killed by Hennessy's onslaught, and before he runs out of the room, Hennessy scrawls symbols all over the place. He still traces the patterns onto his own body with Dantec's blood. Once more making his appearance, Shane instructs him to alert everyone to the risks posed by the black marker. In this condition, he creates a vidlog and broadcasts it from Chicxulub on a variety of frequencies, allowing many people to hear pieces of it despite severe static interference, including scientists. Feeling exposed, Dredger Corps determines that the only way to address this issue is to hold a press conference that embellishes the facts in order to protect their interests. Instead of revealing the marker, they choose to claim that Hennessy simply lost his mind while taking the sub for a test run. When he hears this, Altman initially accepts what happened before deciding it's not good enough and suspecting there was more going on. Dredger Corps calls in the military to take over the salvage effort and get the artifact out for investigation before they realize it's too huge for them to handle at this point. Altman is questioned by the police regarding Hammond's passing. He's quite interested when Ada and Shava later show him the remains of the dead monster spotted at the book's beginning on the beach. Altman goes over the line when he asks the North American Sector Science Foundation to do a comprehensive scientific analysis of the crater. Altman makes the audacious decision to ask for funding for a comprehensive scientific investigation into the anomaly inside the crater, which attracts the unwanted attention of Dredger Corps and military personnel. These two were reportedly in a coalition from the beginning, who come to learn how much he knows. Altman is questioned when Markov and a number of other men enter his home, and they then invite him to join their team. In order to retrieve the submarine from Dredger Corps' unsuccessful recon operation, Altman befriends a submarine pilot named Hendricks. Moresby, a drunk, is his co-pilot. When Moresby shows up for an inspection unskilled and intoxicated, he ends up falling into a shaft and shattering his neck shortly after. Altman becomes accustomed to operating their sub as a co-pilot after being asked to fly alongside Hendricks. Altman will be allowed to operate the sub during the recovery efforts, Markov determines. Hendricks crumbles and tries to kill Altman despite Altman declaring Hendricks to be completely mentally stable, despite their confidence that the unfortunate circumstances of the previous sub won't occur again. The sunken submarine with Hennessy and Dantec's decaying and fragmented bodies inside it is brought back to the surface by Altman, but numerous even more fascinating things go place. He sees and records a necromorphic fish dismembering a regular fish. He keeps the marker fragment that is part of the core sampler for himself. He takes something pinkish from the side of the submarine. The inability to identify the rock or comprehend what kind of technology might alter this kind of stuff in this way causes Altman to discreetly analyze the piece of the marker while his fellow scientists examine the pink materials he found. After waking up in the sick bay, Hendricks kills a nurse before being shot to death. Altman, who had become close to him, is disturbed by this. During the sub's runs, Altman encounters a number of additional co-pilots, some of whom attempt to kill him, and some of whom go more smoothly, such as the psychologist Stevens. Altman thinks the marker has mind control abilities since the intensity of the marker's signal appears to be directly correlated with the moment of the lunacy setting in. Given his resistance to the effects of the marker madness, Altman appears to be the best candidate as a pilot, much to Markov's intrigue, which is likely a result of his skepticism and his remarkably composed demeanor. Altman helps get the artifact up to the research facility despite another close call in the sub, when he has to murder a guy who is attempting to open the hatch to let the ghost of his deceased father inside, although Markov submarines perform the job mostly. Around the marker, a cult of religious momentum had already begun to take shape, and many of the complex's scientists either worshipped the marker or went insane and committed suicide. Altman has a strong skepticism and apprehension for this religious movement. Because he has seen it, they refer to him as their prophet, which freaks him out even more. The believers still think this of him when it's brought up. Altman is interested in the marker, but he doesn't love it as much as its devotees, including his girlfriend, do. Even within believers themselves, people react to the marker in a variety of ways. Some believe it has mysteries that must be studied because they believe it was created in some way to advance humanity. Others, in a genuinely fanatical religious display of illogic, simply state that it loves them, and they love it. Field, a colleague researcher whom Altman had never liked in the first place, becomes even less appealing to Altman now because Field sees Altman as his reluctant prophet. The believers and the military engage in conflict, which results in Field being shot in the foot by Krax, one of Markov's lackeys, who then shoots their beloved marker and threatens to keep doing so in an effort to subdue the believers. His plan is successful. Altman sees the marker and vidlogs it just before he's labeled as non-essential staff and transported back to a mainland Chicxulub facility, where Ada is already present by using his prophetic authority over the believers to make some connections. He's taken away to a place on land where he'll be imprisoned so that they, the military, can silence him. He and Ada escape when the guards begin to dream and are unable to stop them from doing so, and they go to Washington, D.C., where Altman holds a press conference in which he accuses the military of covering up real evidence of extraterrestrial life. Markov is furious and wants to stamp down Altman's danger right away, because the media is so intrigued by his assertions, many of whom are in awe, but others are suspicious, and because the vidlog he made that shows an enormous alien item under examination has so many people talking. When Altman is located by Markov's squad and brought back to the facility, he's separated from Ada and tortured by Krax, who very well may have already killed Ada at this point but chooses not to tell Altman because the possibility that she's still alive is a valuable means of manipulating him. Stevens interrupts Altman's suffering by calling for him to calm the believers, but Altman only takes advantage of the break to learn more about the marker and take another look at it, hoping to repair it by inserting the missing component. The German scientist Showalter explains to him that the marker has a structure similar to that of the Nautilus, and that, although extremely complex, it functions perfectly as long as a compartment is still functioning. It turns out that Stevens is a believer, which explains why he has compassion for Altman. The idea starts to spread among the researchers that the marker is meant to grant perpetual life. Given its great power and significance, it seems certain that it will either be the last bastion of human hope or the cause of humanity's destruction. In the midst of the facility's ceaseless research, a scientist by the name of Grote Guth experiences hallucinations of his grandmother. Exasperated and delirious, he injects himself with a genetically distinct fluid he had created using the purported DNA encoded in the black marker structure to stop the hallucinations. His arm starts to grow and change. He must enter the dead area surrounding the marker as instructed by his grandmother's ghost in order to stop the convergence from intensifying and bringing an end to the human race. Krax, however, shoots Guth in the head when a group of uninformed soldiers arrive. The infection resumes once Guth's dead body is removed from the dead area on a stretcher. It alters the body underneath the sheet. 3 scientists, Hideki Ishimura included, are filming a vidlog when the new infector bursts out of the bed and begins to attack. While the other 2 are slaughtered and turned into slashes, Ishimura manages to flee. The necromorphs enter the laboratory and infect numerous researchers there. The compound quickly descends into chaos. Altman is no longer preoccupied with Krax and Markov. The lower levels are overrun by necromorphs. The majority of the complex's employees are either dead or transformed, but a scientist named Harmon is still alive and kicking in the dead space, still receiving signals from the marker. Markov, Krax, and a few others are able to escape, and Altman and his team of survivors manage to escape by using refurbished plasma cutters to cut through the necromorphs. However, every member of Altman's team perishes, including Field, whose head is strangled off in an elevator shaft during his journey to a boat. Altman enters the facility on the mainland after coming ashore, presumably to find Ada and alert the mainland facility of the necromorph outbreak on the floating research center, since he assumes the command structure has failed in the disaster and Markov is probably dead. When the facility's staff turns out to be Markov's corrupt lackeys seeking to take him away, he's forced to use his plasma cutter to amputate a security guard's arm. The marker summons Altman and shows him a hallucination of Ada. Because the marker only generates illusions of the deceased, he now knows she's dead. Altman has nothing left to live for, and Shava, who rescues him, orders him to go to a secret stash containing dangerous tools and weapons. To Shava's surprise, Altman chooses a chainsaw out of all the weapons in the stash before returning to the floating building above the crater. There, he'll attempt to ascertain what the marker desires and/or how to control the infection before humanity is ruined. When Altman arrives at the floating facility, it's almost completely dark outside, barring the flickering of a few spooky emergency lights. He makes touch with Harmon and must swim across the submerged bay of the floating complex to reach the marker without being attacked by a large number of necromorphs that are prowling the passageways. Along the way, he comes across a number of necromorphs, including the Creeper, and he slowed down the Creeper with a makeshift flamethrower. Altman also faces creatures described as looking like giant spiders with detachable heads, which somewhat resemble divider heads. Altman catches up with Harmon, who follows him around like a slave, shouting, "Altman be praised," over and over again, much to his chagrin. Altman is trying to figure out what the marker is all about. When Altman touches the marker, he finally understands that the voices in his head instructing him to avoid the marker and stop convergence were actually coming from an opposing force that had become imprinted in human brains rather than from the artifact itself. When Altman realizes that the marker wants to be duplicated, he collects as much data as he can about it and sends the replication codes back to the artifact, calming it and causing it to go silent for a brief period of time. Altman then makes an attempt to sink it and obliterate the building. While Harmon is upset by this, he doesn't take any actions to hurt Altman. Altman lies to Harmon, saying that the marker instructed him to leave it alone at the ocean's bottom to rest. In addition to destroying the facility, worth $1 billion, and the artifact, Altman also manages to drown the infection and free the marker. Harmon then struck Altman with their boat's anchor, knocking him out. He awakens to find Markov gloating over the fact that he's a believer. While cracking open a bottle of champagne, he tells him that Krax killed Ada, that Krax is now dead and has changed into a creature, and that Altman must battle this creature with just a spoon. Additionally, he discloses his sinister scheme to establish a formal religion in Altman's honor that will prepare humanity for its ultimate evolution once a new marker has been created based on the previous one but is not broken the next time, creating monsters instead of granting eternal life as the previous one was. Markov claims that the marker is divine because it revives dead flesh, but that it must be used correctly because the previous time it wasn't done so. He and his close friends appear to be adamant that the marker is the secret to defeating death and the source of all earthly evolution. The same humiliating execution is suffered by a distraught Altman, who has learned of his girlfriend's death and is aware of all the ignominy that would be committed in his name after his death. Unitology is the result of the made-up, inflated narratives about Altman. All over the Dead Space universe, Unitology has presented Altman as a saint, a martyr, and the creator of their religion. This is only the media spin Markov and his fellow conspirators created for their own nefarious purposes. Dead Space Catalyst. Catalyst expands on the foundation laid by the preceding book to provide additional understanding of the conditions that ultimately led to the events of the Dead Space video game series. 80 years later, we find Jensi Sato and his older brother Istvan growing up in the Mariner Valley slum, the planet of Vindauga's poorest dome. Whilst Istvan is a clever young man, Jensi is a bit peculiar, fascinated with numbers and patterns that no one else can see and hearing voices that no one else can hear, which makes his behavior exceedingly difficult in social situations. The boys' connection with their mother becomes more strained as they become older due to Istvan's strange behavior, and one day they return home to discover her lying on the floor after just dropping while carrying groceries. Jensi is given a guardian to look after him when their mother is moved into a mental hospital after nearly passing away, but Istvan won't leave their old home. As Jensi becomes older and begins to adjust to a normal existence, he frequently sees his brother struggling to make ends meet, losing himself more and more in a world that only he can see, and withdrawing even farther into his own delusions. Istvan kills a politician as a result of his mental condition. Jensi tries to stop him, but it's already too late. Istvan is taken into custody as a political prisoner and then vanishes. EarthGov sends him to Aspera, an apparently uninhabited, uncolonized planet that has a maximum security prison and a secret research center, after he's been subjected to harsh torture by the Grey Guy. The focal point of this institution is the Black Marker, an ancient alien relic unearthed on Earth 80 years earlier. Istvan appears to be the prisoner at the nearby facility who's most affected by the signals that are being sent out by the object. The story's main premise centers on Jensi's frantic quest for his mentally ill brother, but there are many other characters as well. Scientists put humanity at risk, and agents of EarthGov are constantly tugging strings behind the scenes with malicious intentions. The brothers and Jensi's friend Henry are both well-rounded characters, but the great majority of the other players only serve as plot-advancing triggers. In the end, we witness a fake red marker that EarthGov produced using information from black markers on Earth. The new marker, however, has disastrous ramifications, ultimately resulting in widespread death and destruction. In the climactic scene, a battered and injured Jensi finds the strength to stand up and leave a room in the hopes of finding a means to destroy the facility and the marker, but the creatures quickly oppose him. As he prepares to shoot them, he quickly realizes that the marker is causing him to put the gun in his mouth instead. He then takes a deep breath before doing so. It's a well-written, fascinating novel that's unquestionably at par with the first book. The regard that B.K. Evanson has for the franchise is evident in his work. The gore and blood-splattering action is held back until the very end, which may disappoint anyone seeking a textual version of the video games. However, Dead Space Catalyst will undoubtedly be a hit with those eager to delve deeper into the Dead Space universe's history. The corruption continues. Next up, we have a series of comics explaining how the marker comes back into contact with humanity all these years later. Dead Space, Issue 0. We find Planetside Security, or PSEC officer Vera Cortez and her companion Sergeant Abraham Neumann, stationed on the planet Aegis 7's resource mining colony, just under 200 years from now. Given Earth's diminishing resources, the mining operation managed by the Concordance Extraction Corporation, or CEC, is illegal, but incredibly profitable. When Neumann and Cortez arrive at the scene of an apartment complex following a disturbance call, they're horrified to see blood-covered walls, which serves as another illustration of the recent sharp increase in violent crimes in the mining colony. They discover the tenant's corpse next, which startles before stabbing Cortez in the shoulder. Backup shows up as Neumann struggles with the creature, just in time for it to leap through the wall and flee. Dead Space, Issue 1. Before they're separated by Commander James on Aegis 7, unitologist Vera Cortez and Bram Neumann debate the history and importance of the marker. Supervisor Natalia Deshanov repairs a compressor in one of the colony's oxygen filter bays. When Natalia learns she left a tool bag behind as technician Jerry Cooper closes the doors, she tries to get it, but the doors close, forcing her to make a daring escape and lose her tools in the process. Later, in one of the mess rooms, two miners disagree over the marker, and whether it's a lost human-made artifact or an important alien relic. Due to his inability to make radio contact with PSEC analyst Marla Jansen, Neumann tries to send both miners to the brig, but is unsuccessful. One of the miners is voicing his complaints about insomnia in Dr. Tom Schiarello's office, the colony's main medical official. According to Dr. Schiarello, the miner's inability to sleep is a result of despair brought on by the Ishimura, which swooped in using its shock point drive transport mechanism and will soon steal the miner's glory, according to this theory. The doctor gives the miner some sedatives and sends him on his way, even if he doesn't agree that this is the cause. Finally, we observe a fake red marker produced by EarthGov using information from black markers on Earth. However, the new marker's effects cause mayhem, eventually resulting in murder and destruction everywhere. In the climactic moment, a wounded and injured Jency finds the strength to get up and leave a room, expecting to find a method to take down the facility and the marker, but he's quickly rebuffed by the animals. As he prepares to shoot them, the marker's influence quickly causes him to place the gun in his mouth instead. He then takes a long breath before releasing the trigger. When Neumann and Cortez arrive at Dr. Schiarello's office in response to a distress call, they discover the physician being held hostage by the miner, who's holding a laser cutter and is upset that the doctor conned him because the sedatives didn't work. As Neumann tries to reason with Cortez, Cortez shoots his arm and lunges at him after firing the laser cutter at the police. The doctor is then attended to by Neumann, but as they turn around, they see that the miner has shot Katie, the nurse, tearing her in half. Hanford Carthusia meets Captain Benjamin Matthias of the USG Ishimura over a video conference. Matthias, who is now receiving orders from the Church of Unitology, tells Carthusia to keep the marker secure until the Ishimura arrives, and the fellow Unitologist agrees, responding, "Altman be praised." Deacon Abbott, in the meantime, leads a squad of his Unitologists to search for the marker by using the freshly built tram lines. When Abbott touches the marker, his dead mother appears and tells him to keep the marker safe. Abbott is startled by this apparition. Dead Space, Issue 2. Dr. Schiarello holds a press statement about Katie's passing in Union Square later. However, as he's speaking, the doctor is startled by Katie in the crowd, who orders him to stop them, cutting his speech short. In another location, Neumann arrives at Cortez's apartment after she misses work owing to her sleeplessness. She rejects him after he makes fun of her hallucinations and takes a sick day. Deacon Abbott receives a video conversation from Carthusia in his office, in which he warns him not to touch the marker again and threatens to arrest him if he does. The conversation comes to an end when Dr. Schiarello informs Carthusia that widespread insomnia is reducing productivity, and he thinks the marker may be to blame. With a gang of Unitologists, Deacon Abbott goes to the marker site, but Natalia and Jerry stop him this time. Natalia, a fellow believer, agrees to let them in after hearing about his visions, but Jerry still puts a stop to it. Cortez's ideas and how they led to a rift between the two are discussed while Neumann and Dr. Schiarello travel to the marker's location. When they arrive, Abbott's group is gathered outside and praying when Neumann recognizes Cortez among them. When Neumann wants to take her back to PSEC for a mental health evaluation, Abbott jumps in to interject, and Neumann leaves with Schiarello. This leads to another fight between the two about how her religion affects her employment. Schiarello explains he'd been searching the region for radiation but had discovered nothing when they were on their way back to the colony. Neumann is unable to accept that the marker is radiating something that is causing Cortez and the others to behave differently than they normally would. While everything is going on, a guard by the name of Carver phones Carthusia and tells him about what happened between Neumann and Cortez, as well as how the other guards have become more aggressive. Back at PSEC HQ, Maria shows Neumann a video that was published online by a unitologist of the marker and works to interpret its meaning by examining the markings on it. As Natalia's team leaves the marker to look for the person who took the video, Carver leaves the colony and meets Carthusia in his office. Natalia and her team are asked to leave when Carver arrives back at the marker dig site, but they refuse. She pulls a laser cutter on him and chops his skull in half when he tries to arrest her. One of Carver's squad members then punches her, rendering her unconscious after Jerry manages to calm her down and convince her to lay down her weapons. Later, on a call with Carthusia, Neumann and Commander James beg him to leave the marker alone and evacuate the colony, citing the 2 murders that have occurred since the structure's discovery. However, they are futile because Carthusia won't stop the operation thus close to Planet Crack, where they may harvest Aegis 7's resources for trade. However, he does convey to Commander James and Sergeant Neumann the terrifying information that the marker will shortly be transported to the colony, where it will be put on board the Ishimura upon its arrival. Several engineers, including Jen Barrow's husband Colin, prepare the marker for retrieval at the dig site while they talk about the marker's enigmatic origin and potential impact on the colony's population. Dead Space, Issue 3. Later, when Neumann and Sciarello stroll through the colony, the Doctor describes his impression of Katie after she has passed away. Though he doesn't quite concur with the unitologist, he can appreciate the joy at the marker just now. He then departs from Neumann and goes to talk to Natalia Deshanov, who's being held captive, about her deadly outburst. While Cortez observes, a sizable gathering of unitologists congregate in one of the car maintenance bays where Deacon Abbott preaches that the marker is preparing them to transcend to the next life. Dr. Sciarello later speaks with Natalia to determine how she's doing. Before grabbing his throat and tackling him to the ground, Natalia tells the Doctor that she dreams about killing more people every night and that they all need to leave the Earth. She begs the guard to kill her so that her pain will cease as he rushes in and knocks her off of him with a nightstick. While Neumann observes, the tram shuttle is ready to go to get the marker. Then Maria calls him and urges him to head over to Union Square. In the meantime, Abbott is preaching once more in Union Square, expressing his delight that the marker would soon join them in the colony. When Neumann sees Cortez, he begs her once more to return home and stop listening to Abbott's ramblings. Nevertheless, all she says is that her doom is coming. The team is about to load the marker when Neumann makes a phone call to Maria, who informs him that the colony will be hit by a pulse as soon as they do. At that point, Neumann will experience a severe headache. Everyone in the crowd, including Cortez, draws a gun, points it toward themselves, and then pulls the trigger all at once. Hanford Carthusia smiles as he observes the proceedings from a surveillance monitor in his office as Neumann runs over and cradles his partner's lifeless body. As the tram team moves the marker to the inbound vehicle bay, PSEC officers Jones and McCabe visit Colin Barrow, the tram's foreman, who notes that his crew has been acting rough since they removed the marker. The officers then let Barrow know about the Union Square incident. The Ishimura's Captain Matthias calls Carthusia from his office and instructs him to have the dead in Union Square removed and frozen so they will be in excellent shape when they arrive. Later, a technician named Supervisor Cameron guides Neumann to a vent in a megavent shaft where a red fungus-like substance, the corruption, is developing. It moves out of the way when Neumann tries to grab a sample of it, causing him to burn it up instead. Returning to PSEC headquarters, Neumann talks with Jones and McCabe about the marker's arrival and the symptoms the tram team is experiencing. Then Neumann notices that no crime had been reported since the mass suicides, which is odd given the colony's previous history of rising violence. When Neumann inquires as to Maria's whereabouts, they reply that she was ill and had a headache. Carthusia approaches the marker, places his hand on the object, and inquires as to if it actually holds the key to life after death. The marker is brought to a safe bay in the colony. The wife of one of the miners who discovered the marker called Dr. Sciarello about her husband, who wouldn't leave his room and would only scribble notes and symbols on the wall. Dr. Sciarello then made his way to the Fancher's apartment. Mr. Fancher attacks and chokes the doctor as he attempts to put him to sleep, causing his wife to take the syringe and administer the injection herself. Sciarello tells the woman that whatever is happening in the colony is beyond his comprehension after he's recovered. When Neumann gets to Maria's apartment, she's still fixated on deciphering the marker's symbols. The two then disagree on the meaning of the marker. Neumann wants to ignore it. While Marlowe wants to investigate what it might have to say about extraterrestrial life. Neumann storms out of the building and rushes into Carthusia's office, where he demands that the operation be stopped and lists every death that has occurred since the colony's founding, the majority of which have occurred since they discovered the marker. The operation is now fully under Captain Matthias's control, and the Ishimura has arrived, so even if Carthusia wanted to stop it, he couldn't. Dead Space, Issue 4. Neumann and Sciarello now talk about the consequences after the marker was removed from the colony. Neumann reports that crime is down, but Schiarello claims that psych issues are slightly worse and that 20% of the employees are now experiencing them. The two go to see Natalia in her cell, which is now decorated with messages and symbols that she scribbled on the walls. When Neumann inquires about the markings on the walls after they've left, Schiarello replies that more than half of those who had direct touch with the marker experienced the same reaction. As Neumann leaves the area, Supervisor Cameron calls. He and his employee Lambert had noticed that the growth they'd observed in the vents had grown considerably overnight. Matthias receives another status feed from Carthusia, notifying him that the shuttle carrying the marker and the homicide victims is on its way to the ship. When Carthusia says that a third shuttle carrying the suicide victims is about to depart, Matthias refuses to let him aboard, saying that he won't risk the same madness infecting his ship. He then declares that he's grounding Carthusia and issuing a no-fly ordinance over the planet, prompting a furious Carthusia to threaten to violate his own order in order to obtain the suicide bodies. The insane inmate informs him that they can never go back, and Neumann takes Marla to Natalia's cell to show her the symbols. Later, after showing Carthusia pictures of the alien development in the vents, Neumann dejectedly remarks that it's pointless since Matthias has already imprisoned them there. The following day, Neumann visits Marla's apartment to speak with her. During the conversation, Neumann discloses that she was able to deduce that the marker's symbols represent various forms of genetic code by using Natalia's scrawling. She refuses to go because she's too preoccupied in deciphering the code when Neumann tries to convince her to come with him to the planet Crack. Later, in the mortuary, Carthusia declares to the suicide victims that soon they shall all ascend, just as one of them emerges behind him with limbs that resemble scythes and says, "Altman, be praised." Detective Nathan McNeil is greeted by his old buddy Gabe Weller, who's currently working on the Ishimura in PSEC headquarters. McNeil accompanies Gabe and his team as they make their way to the colony to retrieve the suicide victims from the morgue. But when they get there, the bodies are strangely missing. The Ishimura positions itself and starts the countdown. Just as the globe starts to crack, Marla dials Neumann, and a huge flash erupts, knocking off electricity and communications, setting off a panic. Schiarello runs into Katie again as Natalia's head starts to hurt, and she informs him that it's too late. Captain Matthias attempts to contact Colin Barrow from the Ishimura to get a situation report, but the feed is too jumbled for him to grasp. When they get back to the colony, Barrow notices the corruption covering the walls and the bodies scattered across the floors. Before killing herself in front of her husband by slitting her own throat with a rock saw, Jen states that they want our bodies, as he runs out to check on her. The medical team attacks McNeil and Weller when they return to the colony's mortuary, and the two must battle their way through the insane colonists to get back to PSEC HQ. Cameron loses track of Lambert in the megavans and searches for him, but all he can find is his lantern. When he turns it on, he instead sees a strange creature that attacks and kills him. When Marla is found by Neumann, she claims to have learned something about the marker, but he interrupts her and the two proceed back to HQ. When they arrive at PSEC HQ, they discover a horrifying scene. Commander James, Jones, and McCabe are all dead and badly injured, and the vent growth has invaded the room. Schiarello receives a distress call regarding several killings in another location, and when he leaves his office to investigate, he discovers a number of similarly dismembered carcasses lined in the hallway. Marla discusses what she discovered regarding the genetic instructions of the marker. It appears to infect necrotic flesh, altering the genes of dead bodies at the cellular level, as Neumann analyzes the corpses in PSEC HQ. Dead Space, Issue 5. Then Marla receives a distress call, but before she can respond, one of the dead mutates and attacks, forcing Neumann to flee. Following the creature's mutation of one of the dead bodies, Neumann attempts to engage the new threat with fire. Carthusia presents himself to the beast back in the morgue, but it promptly kills him and flees into the hallways. Marla props a desk up against the creature, but it easily escapes as Neumann keeps shooting at it in an attempt to stop it. Before the couple flee to search for a way out of the colony, Neumann gets a fire axe and chops off one of the creature's heads. When they arrive in the morgue and discover that all of the bodies from the mass suicide are no longer there, Schiarello and a small group of other individuals are attempting to leave the med lab. The doctor then turns to gaze up and sees what happened to them. Fleshy, scythe-armed creatures that come tumbling down from the ceiling and swiftly kill him. Survivors are rushing to the shuttles at Union Square, but the conductor warns that the shuttles won't even be able to travel at their current weight. During the darkness, Natalia managed to escape her cell, and as she leaves, one of the others declares that it's her funeral, to which she nods in agreement. When the monsters get to Union Square, they start killing everyone getting on the shuttle. The remaining survivors are then driven in a panic to the shuttle bay by Neumann and Marla. The Thing emerges from the vents and chases Natalia while she's alone in the hallways in another location. When Neumann and company arrive at a locked door, Marla uses a hack to unlock it. They discover that it is covered in corpses that the infected creatures are now modifying when they come out the other side. One of the survivors tries to save a body he recognizes, but the body emerges and kills him. The group then flees once more as Marla announces that they have run out of time. Dead Space, Issue 6. The group struggles through the corridors until they safely arrive at the shuttle bay. While this is happening, Natalia locates a car of her own, gets inside, and drives onto the surface of the planet after writing a symbol in blood on the windshield. Marla returns to the shuttle bay and observes that one of the shuttles must have already departed. Shortly after, another shuttle lifts off. The shuttle's pilot is concerned that they won't be able to break orbit and arrive at the Ishimura because of the weight of all the passengers. The shuttle descends down to the surface when the pilot, who is trying to land the craft to dump some weight, gets into a battle with a furious passenger and is knocked out. When Marla and Neumann emerge from the blast, they discover the remaining shuttles that have been destroyed, and they witness their last-ditch attempt to flee actually burst into flames. Then Marla offers up one last suggestion: going to the main communications tower and calling the Ishimura in distress. "I'm ready. Make me whole," Natalia says as she stands in front of a massive precipice and takes in the scenery. She then makes a fatal dive into the water below. Through the vents, which have now been entirely taken over by the growth, Marla and Neumann ascend to the communication tower. Neumann spots the visage of his former colleague Cortez emerging from the growth on the wall as they enter a room filled with the creatures. As the two attempt to flee, Marla is captured by one of the beasts and impaled through her chest. Marla awakens Neumann from his stupor. She closes a door behind Neumann with her last breath, shielding him from the horde of monsters. Then, after locating a camera, Neumann creates a video diary in which he describes what happened on Aegis 7 and asks anybody who views it to destroy the planet in order to stop the spread of the illness. Then, he walks off to meet his inevitable demise.
Nurse! Help me restrain him! Kill me!
Evil spreads across the board. Dead space, downfall. An exhausted Alyssa Vincent sits down in front of the recording device as the screen crackles into life. She begins by explaining that the Ishimura fell because of an infestation of parasitic alien organisms brought about by an artifact discovered on the surface of Aegis 7, and instructs the listener that both the Ishimura and the artifact must be destroyed. Message has concluded. 3 patrolling inspectors in RIGs moved back in time to examine any anomalous seismic activity on the planet's surface. They both make observations about the wall's chemical aging and what looks to be a claw print. On the planet's surface, they find a thing called a marker, which Captain Matthias subsequently orders to be carried aboard the Ishimura. After a week, a wave of violent clashes between the miners and the rest of the crew start to multiply. As members of the religious sect known as the Unitologists begged for a glimpse of the marker, a crucial symbol in their faith, hostilities started to flare up. The colony's power goes out as the Ishimura takes up a piece of the planet for mining purposes, and 2 miners, Colin Barrow and Glenn, land after performing a flyover to explore what appears to be a deserted area of the colony. After their shuttle has landed, the men quickly realize that something is wrong. Colin goes searching for his wife Jennifer, while Glenn mysteriously disappears during a brief blackout. Colin discovers symbols of the marker scribbled all over Jennifer's chamber, and he witnesses in horror as she uses a rock saw to sever her throat after murmuring, "They want our bodies." Colin is unaware that an alien presence is attaching itself to his dead wife as he departs the facility with her body while the shuttle door is shutting. On board the Ishimura, Alyssa Vincent, in charge of security, requests that Captain Matthias permit an inquiry into the most recent escalation of violence, but Matthias is adamant that nothing is wrong. As Colin Barrow suddenly stops communication, his ship slams into the hangar, killing him and his mutant wife. When Vincent and her team arrive to control the situation, they don't locate any bodies within the shuttle, but they do know the profuse amounts of blood. They then set out to determine what caused the crash. A man awakens in the sickbay to find extraterrestrial entities transforming the numerous bodies, only to be brutally eliminated shortly after. As confusion and death toll spread across the ship and Matthias calls for order, the situation becomes dire. Dr. Terence Kine accidentally kills Matthias by inserting a sedative needle into his eye after an argument between them about what to do with the marker. Kine then departs in fear. When Vincent and her squad arrive at the morgue, a recently altered corpse has already dispatched one of its teammates. When a horde of mutated crew members surround Vincent and her team as they attempt to make their way back to safety, things turn frantic. When it appears that conventional weapons will be ineffective, Samuel Iron shows up on the scene with a mining tool and quickly dispatches the creatures. Unfortunately, one of the squad members named Hansen loses his mind due to the confusion and kills his teammate Shen. Following this, Hansen and Vincent engage in a brief altercation that results in Ramirez shooting Hansen in the head. When Vincent, Irons, and the final team member Ramirez return to the deck, they find that Dr. Kine has disabled the ship's gravitational controls and is preparing to send it crashing into the planet below. Vincent and the others come upon survivors being attacked by necromorphs on their way to meet Kine, so they rush to help them. Irons buys time for Vincent and Ramirez by using himself as bait while they remove the terrified crew members before being slain and transformed into necromorphs. Ramirez acknowledges that the marker is beginning to have an effect on his psyche as he and Vincent approach the control room where Kine is hiding. Ramirez then offers himself up for Vincent's safety and to give her a boosted start as a swarm of necromorphs approaches. As Dr. Kine fights to save the patient, Vincent enters the room and confronts him. He states that he's taken the necessary steps to eliminate the marker and the infection. As Vincent makes her way to the marker's chamber, everything appears to be lost and she finds herself surrounded by several necromorphs. She finds that the artifact is preventing the creatures from getting close to it after taking cover next to it. Vincent, who has given up, falls asleep, and when she wakes up, she sees Ramirez imploring her to save the ship and finally finish it. The Ishimura and the marker have to be destroyed. Vincent advises in a video log that is uploaded to a nearby distress beacon on a grounded shuttle, detailing the entire event up to this point. As the airlock opens and sucks out the beacon and the necromorphs, Vincent performs one last heroic deed by charging through the crowd of necromorphs and turning on the distress beacon. Vincent makes a few more attempts to hang on, but is also swept away. The song Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star plays as Vincent's body glides into the blackness of space toward the end of the movie. The narrative ends just as the USG Kellion is getting ready to dock on the Ishimura after responding to the distress call and signaling the start of Dead Space. Dead Space Extraction comic. This brief comic gives us a glimpse of the circumstances that led to Nicole leaving Isaac and composing the mysterious message that opens Dead Space. Since the marker boarded the Ishimura, Nicole Brennan's patients have started to self-harm and have hallucinations, which she herself starts to observe. She's also concerned about tales of an outbreak and a shuttle crash landing on the flight deck. Nicole Brennan receives a call from Vincent at her office asking her to check on the new hostages for infection. She then orders them to be quarantined on her deck. First to awaken in the quarantine section, Nicole Brennan tells Lexine that all of the tests are negative except for hers. She is not diseased, but her results are out of the ordinary, including extremely high blood pressure and off-the-charts brain activity. Lexine's scan results are examined by Nicole at a computer terminal while she's alone with a security guard, who won't let her go. There, Nicole discovers distinct peculiar patterns in Lexine's brainwaves. The security officer is killed, and she's forced to flee as a monster erupts from the vents above, giving her little time to consider this discovery. After that, Nicole finds some of the remaining medical personnel in a sickbay. Nicole's team runs out of supplies in the sickbay. She settles down at the computer and continues to study Lexine's brain patterns. Her headache and hallucinations quickly overwhelm her, keeping her from turning around to see the corpses in the sickbay morphing and attacking. Evans, a colleague of Nicole's, observes that Nicole is able to repel them and that there must be a recombinator virus spreading to the dead bodies. When Nicole gets back to her computer, she notices that Lexine's brainwave patterns were symbols, just like those on the marker. Then Nicole figures out how to decode the marker and create an antiviral. Evans tells Nicole that they have run out of the medicine kits, which Nicole believes would be the only way she could inject the antivirus. Nicole, feeling defeated, sits down at a computer, activates the video recorder, and starts to record a message for her boyfriend, Isaac Clarke.
Go. We're coming! Behind those crates.
Dead Space Extraction. Sam Caldwell, one of the small band of miners helping to remove the red marker from Aegis 7, is introduced early in the narrative. The crew started to experience hallucinations, including Sam, who killed many people while suffering from severe paranoia and thought they were coming for him. A PSEC squad arrived and executed him before he could flee. Later, while working on the Rampage case file, Detective Nathan McNeil ran into an old buddy, Gabe Weller, who was then working on the USG Ishimura. The colony fell into anarchy when the planet started to split, the electricity went out, and they were besieged by gigantic reanimated creatures called necromorphs, after first coming under attack by crazy people affected by the red marker. Lexine Murdoch, Sam's girlfriend, as glimpsed in a brief prologue, was also found, and they agreed to take her to safety. Thanks to Warren Eckhart, a mining business official, the group was able to locate a shuttle in the megavents after a frantic search. The Ishimura requested that the four of them return to the surface when they flew to ask for assistance. When the group refused, the Ishimura fired its cannons at them, causing the shuttle to collide with it and forcing the group to spacewalk to an adjacent airlock. The team learned that the Ishimura is inhabited by necromorphs after infiltrating the ship. They came across Nicole Brennan in the medical bay as they made an effort to proceed to the bridge, which they thought would be safer, but she had decided to stay behind in case anyone else showed up. While Lexine was being attacked by swarmers and being pushed into a water tank, the rest of the gang carried on, but soon they were caught in the sewage system. They assumed she'd passed away. After Dr. Karen Howell found Lexine, who had somehow managed to survive, they located McNeil Eckhart and Weller. While Howell tried to shut down the sewage system while being protected by Eckhart, McNeil, Weller, and Legzine moved on. However, Howell was quickly slain by a necromorph tentacle as a result of Eckhart escaping and locking the door behind him. Eckhart lied when he discovered the others, claiming that Howell perished fending against a horde of necromorphs. Weller and Eckhart split from McNeil and Legzine to search several shuttle bays in quest of a shuttle to get off the Ishimura. Eckhart was finishing up a recording of a message for a member of the Church of Unitology when Weller and he discovered a shuttle. Weller started reading the transmission. According to Eckhart, Legzine is the person he was assigned to find, because she's resistant to the marker's effects and can shield others from them as well. Eckhart shot Weller when he finished reading the message and informed him of his plans, only for a leaper to murder him while he was turning away. McNeil removed the power supply to the cannons on the Ishimura that were keeping them from leaving, but he had to hack off his arm in the process after a monster's quill pinned it to the floor. McNeil and Legzine retrieved Weller and fled on the shuttle. They heard a communication from the USG Kellyan while they were running away, and it was made up of the 3 crew members, Zach Hammond, Kendra Daniels, and Isaac Clarke. The events of Dead Space were initiated when the Kellyan infiltrated the Ishimura despite Legzine's best efforts to warn them to leave. In the epilogue, a necromorph is seen attacking Legzine from behind. The dead body of PSEC officer Nathan McNeil is undoubtedly this slasher, according to official confirmation.
What was that? Did you hear that?
Not sure.
The hell? I don't know. Something's in the room with us.
Jesus! Open fire! Open fire!
Isaac enters the Ishimura, a first of many horrors. Dead Space. Isaac Clarke saw a portion of the message Nicole recorded for him while aboard the Kellyan, with the transmission shutting off just before the message's conclusion. Isaac offered to join the crew of the Kellyan to answer the Ishimura's summons without knowing what had become of his girlfriend, hoping to catch up with her once more. The Kellyan collides with the Ishimura's landing bay when its autodock procedures go awry. Zach Hammond, a security guard, technologist, Kendra Daniels, and Isaac leave the Kellyan and start searching for the crew of the Ishimura. The group discovers the ship to be deserted as they continue their investigation. A quarantine lockdown begins when Isaac enters a sealed chamber to utilize a console for additional information. The creatures then smash through the ceiling, killing 2 members of the Kellyan security team and forcing Isaac to flee. Before moving on, Isaac discovers Daniels and Hammond, who survived the attack on the other side of a tram stop. He also finds a plasma cutter and a message scribbled in blood instructing him to chop off their limbs. Isaac fixes the tram so they can travel to the bridge, and Hammond promises to help him find Nicole, if he succeeds. Hammond and Daniels look through the bridge while Isaac returns to the Kellyan to get it ready for launch after fixing the tram system. The shuttle, however, has been harmed by the aliens when Isaac returns, and it explodes shortly after, with the engineer narrowly escaping. Daniels decides that in order to gain access to the Ishimura's key systems, the Kellyan must be destroyed. When it's determined that Captain Matthias is at the morgue, Isaac goes there to look for the man's body. Isaac encounters a few Ishimura crew members who are still alive but are severely mentally ill. These individuals either pass away or commit suicide. Isaac discovers information about the Red Marker, the colony, and the creatures he's been encountering through various audio and text records left by the crew, including the name Dr. Kine gave them, necromorphs. Isaac discovers the mortuary where Captain Matthias' remains are being kept after getting thermite explosive to blow his way into the medical facility. But as soon as an infected necromorph shows up, he transforms the captain, bringing the corpse to life. Isaac is able to obtain the captain's access codes and provide them to Hammond and Daniels after taking care of the beast. Isaac receives a call from Kendra, informing him that he has gotten separated from Hammond as he heads to engineering to attempt to repair the Ishimura's engines. Isaac must first mend the engine before moving on to the asteroid defense system. When Hammond turns to leave, Kendra questions him about his knowledge of the marker and charges him of lying about it to protect CEC. Hammond disputes this and requests a meeting with Isaac at the captain's nest. Isaac discovers Hammond in the captain's nest, where he confirms his lack of knowledge of the marker or the illness ravaging the ship. Before needing to fix the air circulation system, Isaac assists Hammond in fixing the asteroid defense system. On the way, Hammond detonates an escape pod in which he had previously imprisoned a lone necromorph. Isaac encounters Dr. Chalice Mercer, who's still alive but has become insane under the marker's influence and has started worshipping the necromorphs as he travels. Then he encounters a regenerator necromorph that pursues him assiduously while rebuilding back whatever body parts he shoots off. After fleeing this hunter, Isaac arrives at a hydroponics facility where he battles a huge necromorph known as the Leviathan to restore the oxygen levels. Then Daniels discovers an SOS beacon Isaac can use to summon assistance on the mining deck and make his way there. Isaac sees Nicole on his journey to the beacon, and she assists him in getting there. Before launching the beacon, Isaac affixes it to an asteroid in the mining bay. The USM Valor, a military ship, is drawn to the signal, and Isaac fixes the communications equipment so they can communicate. However, when he eventually makes contact with the Valor, he discovers that they picked up the Ishimura's escape pod, the one with the necromorph trapped inside. for transport. When the Valor is overtaken by necromorphs, it collides with the Ishimura's hull. Isaac walks to the cargo area to meet Hammond after he makes the decision to rescue an escape shuttle from the Valor. Isaac can hear Nicole telling him to make us whole again as they go. Later, Dr. Terence Kine, who was still alive and had been listening in on all of their conversations, calls Isaac and begs him to use the shuttle to take the marker back to Aegis 7 so that it won't endanger humanity. While attempting to fix the shuttle with the power core from the Valor, Isaac is forced to see Hammond being killed by a massive, brutish necromorph. While getting additional components to keep the shuttle running, Isaac runs into Kine. Before begging him once more to return the marker, Kine shows him a video of a massive tendrilled necromorph creature named the Hive Mind that rules over all the others and is located at the planet's core. Isaac witnesses Mercer become infected and turn into a necromorph, which he disposes of, before heading to the flight deck to meet Kine to load the marker. As Kine unloads the marker from the cargo hold and loads it onto the shuttle, Isaac arrives on the flight deck to witness the event. Isaac is stunned to witness Kine shot in the chest and killed by Daniels, who then flies the shuttle away alone, just as he was getting ready to board it. She admits that she was an undercover agent for a federal agency the entire time in a call to Isaac. She says that the marker they found was a replica created by reverse engineering the original one found on Earth. Isaac receives a call from Nicole asking him to meet her in the flight simulator after she takes off. Nicole informs Isaac in the control room that he can operate Daniel's shuttle remotely. He returns it to the flight bay after doing so. Isaac is able to board the shuttle with Nicole to return the marker to Aegis 7 while Daniels manages to flee in one of the shuttle's escape pods. Isaac flies down to the planet, unloads the marker, and brings it back to the dig site. Nicole says we are whole after putting it back in its original spot before vanishing. The planet fragment that was removed by the Ishimura's planet crack then starts to fall back to the planet quickly as a result of this action, disturbing the gravity tethers. He ultimately sees the conclusion of Nicole's film when Kendra Daniels reappears as he prepares to leave. This video reveals that Nicole had murdered herself, and Daniels had known all along, but had kept it from Isaac in an effort to control him. She also discloses that Isaac's recent images of Nicole are simply a result of the marker-caused dementia that Matthias and Kine both experienced. Daniels is about to board the shuttle as Isaac returns, but before she can, one of the hive mind's tendrils emerges and kills her. The enormous beast is then forced upon Isaac, who eventually defeats it. After the battle, Isaac dashes to the shuttle, leaving the marker there just in time for a fragment of the planet to escape destruction and drop down to the surface. Just in time, Isaac is able to get on the shuttle and observe the devastation as it takes off. Later, Isaac removes his helmet in the cockpit. He turns off the video as Nicole's final clip is playing. Though he's left the marker behind, its effects will still be felt by him. As he turns, though, he witnesses another vision of her lunging at him and the marker's symbols.
Uniform looks simple. There's no scratching or sign of cutting, as if the crystal itself gave birth to it.
The marker's reawakening. Dead Space. Aftermath. The Concordance Extraction Corporation sends the starship USG O'Bannon to investigate when the USG Ishimura and the Aegis 7 settlement are no longer responsive on comms. However, the firm also loses touch with the O'Bannon. Portaling to the O'Bannon, the EarthGov interceptor USM Abraxas docks. When Marines got on board the ship, they discovered dead, dismembered bodies. 4 employees in engineering are still alive, according to their scanners. The Marines travel to engineering, where they encounter the 4 survivors: Isabel Cho, a doctor; Alejandro Borges, a technician with a robotic arm; and Nicholas Kuttner, head of security. After yelling some gibberish about his daughter, Kuttner murders a Marine. After rendering them helpless, the Marines transport them onto the Abraxas. Following the O'Bannon's destruction, the Abraxas exits the Aegis system via a portal. On the Abraxas, which is sailing to the Sprawl, a big station on a shard of Titan, the 4 people discover themselves in a holding cell. The Overseer gives the Chief Interrogator 7 hours to extract whatever data he can from the survivors. First, Kuttner is questioned. To persuade him to collaborate, they leverage his fear of being set on fire. Vivian, Kuttner's daughter, died before the mission. On the O'Bannon, we see him in a meeting room with Cho, Strauss, Rin, a soldier, and Sergenko, their boss. Together with his unitologist friend Omar and his 19-year-old cousin Noah, Borges enters the space. They were all rescued from the swarm. The engineers are dismissed after Captain Campbell welcomes them and says that the personnel will maintain Aegis 7's gravity. Campbell continues by stating that Kuttner's crew is tasked with bringing back the marker's salvaged parts, which are valued at millions of credits. On Aegis 7, which is now way too unstable, the crew and engineers land. Kuttner's crew divides up as the engineers try to fix the gravity stabilizer. A piece of the marker that Kuttner finds has a severe impact on him. He experiences a flash of his daughter. As a result, he attacks the engineers because he thinks they're monsters that are trying to harm her in a dream. His friends lock him up in the shuttle after he kills Noah and breaks the stabilizer, unknowingly. The restraints are released after he's finished speaking. Before being shot, Kuttner murders a number of Marines and guards. His daughter enters an airlock while he watches her. He releases the airlock, killing both him and all the Marines as they try to seize him. Borge is brought in, and he tells that while the crew reached the shuttle, Rin, Serjenko, and Omar perished. The shuttle had to be crash-landed into the Orbanon by Borge. Aegis 7 catches fire just before the shuttle is about to portal jump. The shock point drive is severely damaged by the debris. The death of his cousin infuriates Borge, who demands to discover the significance of the marker shard. Borge attacks the captain after hearing him describe how valuable the shards can be. He responds to the captain's command to mend the shock point drive once Cho and Strauss have calmed him down. The main interrogator promises Borge that he would go home after giving his account. Then he has Borge executed. Nolan Strauss is sent in by him. After receiving the marker shard from the Orbanon, Strauss begins his narrative. Strauss was aboard the Orbanon with his family, but the relationship was suffering as a result of his obligations. He starts to examine the shard, and it starts to have the same kind of impact on him that it did on Kuttner. He starts to become fixated on the marker after noticing symbols everywhere. He reveals to the captain that it's possible that a higher power created the marker and how it uses DNA from necrotic flesh and improves it by rearranging it. He removes a cadaver from the morgue and brings the shard in close proximity to demonstrate this notion. The corpse becomes a necromorph and starts morphing and killing crewmen all throughout the ship. Strauss quickly escapes to his living space and murders his children and wife because he sees them as necromorphs. Strauss is being held by the chief interrogator after learning that he can speak with the marker. Then we find out that Isabel is in love with Strauss, with whom she was having an affair. While he continued to study the shards, however, she started noticing him change. They start getting intimate in the laboratory, but end up breaking into a fight, resulting in him asking her to go away. Several other doctors and she visit Kuttner before heading to the morgue. They reach there to find the bodies missing and a bunch of dead doctors. The party is forced to evacuate when one of the dead doctors' bodies transforms into a necromorph. Kuttner kills the necromorph once she releases him. She visits Strauss's residence to find out that he killed his wife and son. Captain Campbell, who's currently battling the necromorphs alongside the security squad, is eventually encountered by them. The captain, Kuttner, Cho, and Strauss run into the air vents as the necromorphs overpower the last of the security. They arrive at Strauss's lab and meet up with him there along with 2 bridge officers and Borge. According to Strauss, eliminating the shard might just put an end to the necromorphs. According to Borge, inserting it into the shock point drive might both destroy it and cause the drive to restart. They proceed to engineering, carrying weapons produced by Borge. A hull breach brought on by planet debris damages the control of the outer door. Captain Campbell offers himself as a sacrifice to manually close the door to get all the way to the drive. The 4 survivors fight off the necromorphs. Cho hits Strauss and tosses the shard on her own after he refuses to toss it into the drive. The energy destroys the necromorphs as the drive begins. Cho is told that the USM Abraxas has arrived in the sprawl after giving her account. Cho hypothesizes that her higher-ups are utilizing those who have been exposed as human test subjects because they're cognizant of the marker's effects. The interrogator and his helper are killed by the overseer, who travels with Cho on her way to the sprawl. Cho is offered a place as the project's leader by the overseer, but she declines after realizing what her higher-ups have accomplished. She's strapped down to a bed where a machine drill enters the frame, probably lobotomizing her, since she's subsequently seen with a small amount of blood on her forehead and a blank look on her face. The torturer, along with his assistant, are watching a news story in which Cho is charged with terrorism behind the Aegis 7 colony, USG Ishimura, and USG Orbanon tragedies. They also talk about researching Strauss and Isaac Clarke, a crazy man they discovered on a ship a few weeks before. Dead Space, Salvage 2509. A large number of necromorphs pursue Captain Benedict Maliak of the Magpie ship Blackbeak across the Ishimura's corridors, and he eventually transforms into one before waking up. Julia Copland, his adjutant, consoles him before calling their attention to a mineral motherlode. David Chang, the defense secretary for the Earth government, shows up at the Aegis 7 blockade in the interim. He's been instructed to locate the marker and the Ishimura, which they're unable to find. They are moreover joined by the oracles, who take charge of the circumstance. Returning to the Magpie's viewpoint, they detect an abnormal reading while using a shock ring to deliver eggs, clusters of minerals, to their nest, a big story ship. The Ishimura, which is startled into their position, damages the Hunter Moon, a ship commanded by Jessica Lee and Stefan Schneider, and destroys their nest along with its captain, Belevin. They are able to hold the Ishimura in place using gravity tethers so they can start boarding. The Ishimura is severely damaged, and the majority of its systems are either broken or dysfunctional. It's entirely made up of biological muck rather than inhabitants or necromorphs. Maliak explores crystals on the ship's side that turn out to be marker shards. However, when he goes too close to them, he blacks out and has a nightmare about being pursued by a hunter-like necromorph. Gachura Okeki, Stefan, and Jessica explore the ship. He takes the shards to Ishimura when he awakens. The crew is gathered at the bridge after Jessica chooses to salvage the spacecraft for parts. Maliak demonstrates the marker's components to them while they talk about what will happen to the crew. When Lee suggests selling the marker shards, Maliak attacks her. After a brief battle, he's subdued, and Venshift, one of his crewmates, puts him in the brig. When Copland departs for the Earthguard barrier carrying a few fragments of a marker, the crew realizes there may be an entire marker on board and becomes alarmed. Lee organizes the team and assigns each member a responsibility. Okeki goes to engineering to fix the shock point drive. She also visits Malyak to see if his sanity has returned. The remaining crew members keep an eye out for Earthgov. When Julia first arrives at the Earthgov barricade, no one will take her seriously unless she has marker shards in hand. Chang consents to discuss a deal with her, but the mediators are the oracles. She requests a prize or something, following the disclosure of all the details. What Copland received was her own execution. A hallucination of Belvin in the brig wakes up Malyak. It draws his attention by alerting him to the need for his healing. The necromorph biomass reanimates him in the meantime, consumes him, and completes him. Venshift goes insane at about the same time and attacks Stefan in a psychotic rage. Venshift tries to choke Stefan, but Stefan grabs him with a piece of a marker in vengeance. The team notices the marker is missing after scanning the remaining logs. They tell Lee, who's being pursued by a necromorph, the news. Malyak's necromorph form descends and murders Lee as soon as they hear its hissing over the comm. Suspicious, the group proceeds to go to Lee's level, where a huge necromorph that resembles a brute rapidly dismembers Thorson and Gottadir. Wenbo and Stefan start shooting at it, but the brute and Wenbo are both destroyed when Stefan blows up a relay. Although Stefan survives and tells Okeki to escape, additional enormous necromorphs in the engine room murder him and his crew. Earthgov and the Oracles both board the Ishimura, but the Oracles take a stealth shuttle. In order to get to the Marines to visit the cargo bay, which is home to necromorphs, Stefan interacts with them. Despite realizing the con, the Oracles decide to buy time by leaving the Marines to their fate. They then start the quarantine procedures. While searching the cargo bay for Stefan and the marker, the Marines, under the command of Captain Amiz, discovered necromorphs and death. Despite defeating the necromorphs, Stefan is imprisoned by the quarantine. The remaining members of the Earthgov team are slain while Stefan manages to escape. The Oracles, meanwhile, easily dispatch necromorphs with unusual weaponry. When they arrive at the bridge, they discover that Stefan was conducting a spacewalk while the marker was destroyed. They pursue him and confront him, but a hive mind stops them. After dispatching it, the Oracles resume their struggle with Stefan inside. They try to corner Stefan, but he argues that he can shock them all with a remote. When the Oracles understand that the remote control is actually simply a radiation detector, they stop partially disclosing their goals. Making a break for it, Stefan exits through a hatch. When the hatch closes, the Oracle who's holding the weapon loses an arm. Then, a horde of furious necromorphs slaughters both Oracles. Stefan battles his way through the necromorphs with their peculiar weapon. They have surrounded his ship, so he chooses to take the Oracle's stealth shuttle to flee. He gets in touch with Earthgov and lets them know where the Ishimura is. Chang tells Stefan to stay, but Stefan insults him and leaves through an unidentified location.
I don't know what's real anymore.
Death Space, Mobile, 2511. A few years later, the Church of Unitology dispatched an agent with the codename Vandal to the government sector on the Sprawl with the mission of destroying some power boxes and interrupting the station's communications. Tyler Radikov, their support, assist them in completing this, and Vandal then exits the station. They encounter necromorphs along the route, forcing them to turn around and flee in search of a tram. Vandal receives a call from Diana Le Guin, a unitologist, congratulating them for their contribution to the cause, even though she expects them to perish from the outbreak they unintentionally caused. In order to undo the harm they've caused and prevent the necromorphs from infecting the Sprawl's populace, Vandal collaborates with director Hans Tiedemann after feeling mistreated and misled by the Church. They achieve this by fixing the quarantine systems they disrupted. After fixing the seals, Vandal is guided to the Titan mines in the government sector underbelly, while having some hallucinations along the way. There, Tyler calls Vandal and promises to assist Vandal in figuring out how to stop the sickness from spreading. Tyler states that he was unaware of the Church's intentions on their previous mission. Vandal collaborates with Tyler to lock down several Titan station doors while battling other hallucinations. As soon as Vandal enters the crossover seal maintenance tunnel, Tyler persuades him to remove the seal door security, which would cause a lockdown and shield the Sprawl's surface from the necromorph breakout. However, they rapidly discover that the reverse was the case when Vandal does so. Tyler, a representative of the Unitologists, had once more employed Vandal by destroying the doors, leaving them wide open for the necromorphs to swarm to the surface. Vandal attempts to repair the station's core to prevent it from being completely destroyed now that he can only rely on Director Tiedemann. Vandal finally makes it to the center, where they encounter a massive necromorph that they must fight. Along the way, they see several hallucinations, one of which is of a huge white marker in a desert. Vandal's helmet is knocked off as she gains the upper hand, revealing her to be Carrie Norton. Carrie is terribly injured but manages to escape the necromorph's attempt to draw her into the core. She tries to reach Tiedemann via phone to let him know she stabilized the core, but gets no answer. Later, as the unitologists celebrate their successful sabotage operation, Carrie's helmet is seen by itself, leaving just a blood trail in her wake.
There you are at last. Feels like my whole life has been leading here, you know? And that's it.
You're a free man.
Dead Space, Ignition, 2511. At about the same time, we come upon Sprawl technician Franco Dalil, who has been dispatched by Weaver, his superior, to repair a broken door. He's accompanied by Sarah Anderson, a security and maintenance officer for the CPD, with whom he's presently having a covert relationship. When the two get to the door, they run across Supervisor Burkhoff, who thinks that the door wasn't just broken, rather, it had been purposefully destroyed. After repairing the door, Burkhoff requests Franco's help in checking the logistics department's computer systems, because they'd recently also been experiencing problems. When Franco and Sarah inspect the terminal, they discover that it's also been purposefully infected with a virus of some sort. The pair are then assigned to fix solar panels on the ship's exterior. Despite Franco's dread of spacewalks, he goes out and fixes the panel successfully. However, the couple hears a loud crash as a meteor impacts the air seal as they head back to re-enter the station, causing Franco to swiftly lock it down. After reaching safety, however, Weaver calls with alarming news. A type of outbreak occurred while they were outside the station, and the people of the Sprawl are starting to panic. Then, Franco gets a text message from an unknown number that simply says, "Ready to rise." As they wait for additional instructions at the tram stop after being sent there by Weaver, Sarah notices a group of people being pursued and attacked by a necromorph. The stampeding throng knocks Sarah and Franco to the ground, and in a panic, Sarah grabs a nearby plasma cutter and shoots off the monster's limbs, rendering it helpless. Sarah, Franco, and the other survivors board a tram and ride away as more necromorphs advance. While Sarah is on the tram, Franco receives a call from Weaver about the monsters that are proliferating throughout the Sprawl, and Sarah receives a call from her ex-partner on an ongoing hostage situation. After making a decision regarding one issue, the pair will then be presented with another. Regardless of the choices Franco makes, the two manage to deal with a few emergency circumstances brought on by the outbreak, but their efforts are ultimately ineffective because the necromorphs are still engulfing the Sprawl. No matter what steps Franco takes, Sarah always dies as a result of them. Franco then receives a second message that reads, "He awaits." The cryogenic storage pods are then discovered by Franco when he visits the hospital on the Sprawl and investigates the psychiatric ward. Then it becomes clear that Franco had been operating covertly for the unitologists as an agent on a mission to release a certain patient. Then, after hacking one of the pods, he approaches the viewing window and tells Isaac Clarke inside, "You're a free man." Dead Space 2, Severed, 2511. After the majority of Gabe's patrol squad is killed in the Titan mines during his first encounter with the necromorph epidemic, Gabe is able to get in touch with Lexine to inform her of the outbreak. After his emergency alert is transmitted, Gabe moves into the mines, passing through several locations that Isaac Clarke will later explore. As he's doing this, Director Tiedemann sends a signal directing all remaining security teams to clean the facility and get rid of all important people. Gabe approaches the hospital in a gunship with fresh zest in an effort to reach Lexine before his superior commander does. Finally making it to the psych ward, Gabe discovers Victor being rendered inoperable by two mysterious men who claim to be carrying out orders to kidnap Lexine for further investigation. Lexine flees into the ship as her two captors turn into necromorphs, which Gabe quickly eliminates as he pursues the two strange guys to a docked ship. When Gabe and Lexine try to flee, they discover that the airlock is closed and only accessible via a console that can be hacked close to the ship. Gabe is ambushed with a live grenade by Victor as he tries to hack the airlock. The device explodes after a brief battle, killing Victor and badly injuring Gabe, who has his right leg amputated and his helmet damaged. He blows the 4 airlock fuses in his dying moments, letting Lexine and their unborn child escape. Gabe bids them farewell before passing out from his injuries as they leave the station. The epilogue shows that Lexine is still missing, and EarthGov has collected Gabe's remains for analysis.
Oh my god. I built that. What?
Dead Space 2, 2511. The game starts in a hospital on the Sprawl, a heavily populated city constructed on a fragment of Saturn's largest moon, Titan. Franco, the main character in Dead Space Ignition, has just released Isaac Clarke, who has no memory of the previous 3 years. However, Franco is slain and turned into a necromorph before he can unfasten the restraint, enabling Isaac to go on his own. Later, he receives a call from Dana Le Guin, who directs him to where she is. Another patient, Nolan Strauss, contacts him and claims that he and Isaac can eliminate the marker. Isaac ignores Strauss and pushes into the city to get Dana. When Isaac arrives, two guards capture him as Dana reveals that she's a unitologist who was dispatched to recover Isaac. She claims that he's to blame for the infestation that is currently occurring because of the marker he built and that they need him to create additional markers. A gunship shoots Dana and her companions just as they're ready to leave, allowing Isaac to escape. Since Strauss's only task at this point is to destroy the marker, Isaac reluctantly agrees to trust Strauss after speaking with him once again. He informs Isaac that the government sector where the marker is under lockdown. As Isaac travels there, he meets Ellie Langford, a CEC officer who later joins their mission after determining that she needs their assistance to survive. Hans Tiedemann, the station's administrator, places many barriers in their path as they move through the sprawl to prevent them from reaching the marker. Strauss later attacks Ellie as his dementia progresses. She survives, and Isaac is subsequently forced to avenge himself by killing Strauss. As Nicole tries to distract him from his mission, Isaac sees Nicole more vividly as he battles his way to the marker. He eventually realizes that he must give his life to stop the marker, which will make Nicole's visions nice and peaceful, and that he can't escape any longer. When they arrive in the government sector, Isaac sends Ellie away on a gunship by herself. She'd anticipated that he would go along with her. He opens the doors holding back the necromorphs trying to approach the marker while narrowly missing Tiedemann's troops, and the marker overwhelms them. Finally, Isaac finds the marker, which is encircled by necromorphs. The marker starts convergence, an occurrence predicted by the unitologists as Isaac watches. He locates a device that unlocks the closed, marker-infected areas of his mind under the guidance of Nicole, who appears to him in the vision. Nicole believes that this device will assist him. After that, he engages in combat to go to the marker, where he runs into Tiedemann, whom Isaac is compelled to kill. Isaac then moves closer to the marker when the vision of Nicole abruptly pulls him into his own thoughts. The marker and Nicole vision-affected elements that Isaac discovers there explain that there is only one way to be reborn, and that is to take on the body and mind of the one who made it. After a protracted struggle, Isaac is able to extinguish Nicole's vision and eradicate all signs of the marker's effect from his mind, therefore destroying the marker. As the marker is violently destroyed, causing the station to collapse, Isaac slumps to the ground and prepares to meet his fate. Ellie calls Isaac out of the blue and sends the gunship crashing through the roof. Isaac climbs onto the gunship as Titan Station crumbles, and the two of them are able to flee. Following the credits, an audio transmission between a ranked superior and an unidentified subordinate can be heard, known only as the Overseer, from one of the many text logs that can be collected during the course of the game. The subordinate transmits the news that the marker and Titan Station, also known as Marker Site 12, have been destroyed. The Overseer responds that after that, it'll be up to the other locations to pick up the pieces. Dead Space, Liberation, 2514. 3 years later, Sergeant John Carver is on patrol on planet Uxor at one of those locations with another fabricated marker. He's on the phone with his wife, Damara, who's upset about his lack of family time. During the call, Carver notices a laser sight pointed at the marker and tells his wife and children to go before a missile hits the marker and causes a huge explosion. A passing spacecraft crashes into a residential sector of the colony after the marker's safety shroud is shattered by the explosion and is left uncovered, emitting a strong electromagnetic pulse that temporarily knocks out all electricity in the region. The necromorphs approach Carver as he makes his way to his family's house to check on them, but he's able to beat them off and make it to a science building in the neighborhood. Once inside, he locks the necromorphs outside behind him. Carver finds Jacob Arthur Danik inside the facility talking to a group of fellow unitologists about the ship going down, which wasn't their intended course of action before he orders them to get him that data. Damara calls out John's location to the group, who then pursue him and use concussion rounds to take him out. When he wakes up, he discovers that he's bound, and the group questions him to find out who was responsible for the marker. Carver won't respond, so one of the men searches him up to find out that his wife, Dr. Damara Carver, was one of the researchers looking at the marker, and they find his address so they can go and kidnap her. Carver snaps out of his shackles in a fit of rage and manages to seize one of his captor's weapons. Just as the necromorphs burst through the facility's perimeter and start to enter, he starts to open fire. Carver uses the diversion to get away, but Danik is unfazed because he knows they'll discover what they're seeking soon. When Carver gets home, he finds his wife and kid have both been horrifyingly changed into necromorphs, and he's compelled to put them both out of their suffering. Carver, who's overcome with grief, prepares to shoot himself, but is interrupted by an incoming transmission from a hidden radio to Damara. Ellie Langford, who has been collaborating with Damara on exposing the centuries-long cover-up of human meddling on the markers, is on the other side when he answers the call. The two agree to meet at the main cargo dock so that her boyfriend, Captain Robert Norton, can take them off-planet on the USM Eudora. She gives Carver instructions to obtain Damara's hard disk. The two are ambushed by Danik's troops and necromorphs at the cargo dock. Still, just as they're about to be cornered, Norton descends, allowing them to escape in the Eudora, with Carver pledging his vengeance on Danik as they fly away. The footage from Damara's drive, which Norton and Ellie play on the Eudora, shows the deceased doctor revealing the findings of her research. The Sovereign Colony's replication of the marker over 2 centuries ago was done so in order to triangulate the location of a master signal, which was then broadcast through all of the markers. Carver offers to assist in completing his wife's job in memory of her, and the two of them proceed to the Ptolemy station, the site of the triangulation operation. Ellie restarts the triangulation algorithms on the station using Damara's findings, and they find the source of the master marker signal. The gang then travels to the Keyhole station, burning the Ptolemy station as they go to stop it from coming into the hands of the unitologists, because they need to utilize a shock station to broadcast a signal far enough out. Ellie says she knows someone who can translate it, Isaac Clarke, as she looks through more of Damara's data on the way. She discovers chunks of data written in the marker language. Norton doesn't like the notion since he's aware that the unitologists are likely following him, and because Ellie had had a brief relationship with Isaac after the events on the Sprawl, which made Norton envious. The group soon arrives at the Keyhole station, and Ellie goes to comfort Carver, who's still mourning the loss of his family. However, when they arrive, they discover necromorph presence evidence, which alarmed them that the plague was spreading. Their worries are quickly realized when they come under attack from necromorphs, requiring them to engage in combat in order to get past them. In the meantime, an unidentified enemy begins to fire on the crew of the Eudora. Ellie is separated from Carver and Norton, and the ship's hull is compromised when a shot misses the ship and hits the Keyhole station. Soon after, Ellie meets Austin Buckle, a marker researcher, and Jennifer Santos, a station technician. The gang then works to reassemble with Carver and Norton in the control room. Danik reprimands his troops for targeting the station instead of the ship while they're in the unidentified craft, reasoning that because the Eudora went there, it must be significant. To get to the control room, Carver and Norton must fight their way through a huge necromorph. Once there, they utilize the command console to enter the coordinates into the shocking gate relay. Due to necromorph resistance, Ellie is unable to reach the command center and instead takes a flyer straight to Tau Volantis, where she'll pick up a shock point beacon to help them locate one another later. Ellie's flyer passes through the shocking gate of the station and is able to go to Tau Volantis. Norton and Ellie part ways, and Ellie's craft jumps as Norton engages Danik with station defenses. The two are taken aboard the Eudora, and they demolish Keyhole Station. Carver and Norton then open fire on the gate, destroying it and harming Danik's ship because they're aware that they must stop Danik from following Ellie at all costs. When Carver discovers that they can't read the marker symbols in her data without Damara, he asks Norton if anyone else is capable of doing so. He reluctantly admits that Isaac Clarke is the only other. Back at it again. The marker will not relent, but neither will Isaac. Dead Space 3, 2514. The prologue of Dead Space 3 takes place on the freezing planet of Tau Volantis on June 18, 2314. Following the necromorph invasion, a research group of the Sovereign Colony's armed forces is obliterated. Near the end, Dr. Earl Serrano, a researcher, assigns soldiers Tim Kaufman and Sam Ackerman to seek among the wreckage of a wrecked ship with a powerful gadget known as the Codex. Following the recovery of the Codex, Ackerman is entombed by an avalanche, and Kaufman meets General Mahad, one of the expedition's leaders. Mahad asks Kaufman a few questions before he was suddenly shot in the head. Then Mahad purges the data from the Codex and pulls the trigger on himself. On the New Horizons lunar colony in the year 2514, the narrative continues 200 years later. Following the events of Dead Space 2, Isaac Clarke has been hiding from EarthGov for the past 3 years. Isaac is abruptly challenged by Sergeant John Carver and Captain Robert Norton after previously getting a message from his companion Ellie Langford about her going on. According to Norton, Ellie wants Isaac's assistance for a different markers-related operation. The ruthless inner circle of the Church of Unitology unexpectedly attacks the colony. The soldiers, under the supervision of the inner circle's chief, Jacob Arthur Danik, ambush Isaac after the three men have been split up. A marker test lab in the colony center is surrounded by containment barriers that Danik destroys, and the circle massacres the majority of the New Horizons security force. The marker signal is widely released, and Danik simultaneously orders similar attacks on labs in other significant settlements, unleashing a deadly wave of necromorph infestation against human civilization. Isaac is able to escape during the ensuing mayhem and board the USM Eudora using the lunar train system. Isaac, Norton, Carver, Rosen, and Locke board the USM Eudora and travel through shock space to the Tau Volantis system, where Ellie's last point of contact was. The crew discover discovers themselves surrounded by mines when the ship enters orbit around the planet, and the ship quickly suffers severe damage. Through the use of an emergency pod, they are able to get away and dock with the abandoned CMS Roanoke, which is emitting Ellie's SOS signal. Isaac defends the ship against necromorphs while reviving its power and functionality. He does this by utilizing his engineering knowledge and military expertise. When he eventually sees Ellie again, he learns that she has started dating Norton. The researchers Santos and Buckle, who are a part of Ellie's marker ops team, are the next people Isaac encounters. Ellie claims that the Roanoke's captain left markers writings on the wall of her room, which could lead to more information. After more investigation, Isaac deciphers the writing. He discovers that the captain had been fixated on the order to turn it off after discovering a machine that can control the markers. Tau Volantis is the marker's homeworld, according to Ellie. Norton quickly urges the group to flee to safety, but Ellie, Isaac, and the marker ops team press on with the mission. On the CMS Terra Nova, a spare shuttle is discovered that can land on the planet's surface. According to Norton, Isaac is supporting Ellie because he's obviously still in love with her and is attempting to win her back by doing so. He begs Isaac to give up the quest so that Ellie will be safe, pointing out that there's little chance of success and a high likelihood that they'll perish. But Isaac insists that if they give up, everyone will perish. Norton continues to criticize the mission, express questions about it, and constantly belittle and defame Isaac. The squad then takes the backup shuttle and makes its way to Tau Volantis for the landing. When the spacecraft is thrown off course during the landing sequence, it crashes, instantly killing Locke and Rosen and separating Isaac from the others. Isaac finds a film that Ellie and the other survivors had recorded while desperately rummaging through the ship's debris. Isaac regains consciousness on the cold planet, where he's severely hypothermic but warmed by smoldering trash piles. Isaac enters a building after following Ellie's trail of flares, where he discovers Buckle unconscious on the floor. They have a brief conversation. Isaac discovers a rig that can resist sub-zero temperatures while Buckle succumbs to his wounds. After overcoming waves of necromorphs, Isaac finally reaches Ellie and the squad. A signal originating from a warehouse at the opposite end of the complex has been successfully found by Santos. They're found and ambushed by Danik and his soldiers while they're trying to get to the warehouse. Even though the squad is split up, they're able to get away from the unitologists and reunite at the warehouse. The Nexus, a massive frozen necromorph found in the warehouse, is equipped with signals that may be traced back to the marker. When Isaac and Carver try to defrost it and triangulate the signal, Danik's forces ambush them and take them prisoner. They arrived at Tau Volantis thanks to Norton, according to Danik. By reminding Danik of their deal and excoriating only Isaac, who is viewed as a marker killer, Norton tries to save Ellie and the gang. Danik claims that he'll put an end to them all and bring about humanity's redemption and rebirth, as promised by unitology. As Norton is ready to be shot, the now-awake Nexus attacks them. Isaac promptly deals with Danik, saving Norton in the subsequent confusion. Norton turns nasty and starts blaming Isaac for all of the deaths and disasters of the expedition after Isaac and Carver defeat the Nexus. Isaac fires back in self-defense after Norton fires at him, hitting Norton in the head. The group is depressed by the fact that there are now only 4 of them left as Isaac tries to explain what happened to Ellie. Santos finds information on a tool the scientists call the Codex and a map called Rosetta in a lab atop a neighboring mountain. Santos is on the elevator lift as the snow beast attacks while the gang is climbing the mountain. Santos must be sacrificed and the main line severed by Carver in order to save the entire cliffside from crumbling. Isaac rejoins Ellie and Carver at the lab after dismantling the snow beast with harpoons driven by engines. After offering Ellie an apology for everything that's happened, the two seem to be rekindling their romance. As they go about the lab, they come into Rosetta, who turns out to be an alien that has been divided into many parts. Rosetta has knowledge about the Codex, the markers, and convergence in her brain. When all the Rosetta puzzle pieces are put together, Isaac has an epiphany. Rosetta was one of the ancient extraterrestrial civilizations that discovered a marker. This ultimately resulted in a catastrophic necromorph invasion. The convergence event started after enough biomass was under control. It's revealed that the necromorph moon created during the event is the same moon orbiting Tau Volantis. The event involves a vast transfer of organic matter, necrotic flesh, and other materials into orbit alongside the marker. Due to the necromorph marker signal being transmitted by these moons across the stars, civilizations have replicated and experimented on the ostensibly lifeless but actually highly energetic necromorph markers. This eventually causes rampant infestation, convergence, and new moons as the signal interacts with and influences an increasing amount of necrotic matter. The aliens, who are in danger of losing their civilization and going extinct, spent the last of their resources to build a city-sized machine that was so incredibly powerful that it swiftly froze Tau Volantis' primarily oceanic planet, stopping the convergence event. Unknowingly disclosing most of this to Danik, who later takes the Codex, is Isaac. Danik, however, leaves after Isaac catches the unitologist by surprise. As the deadly gas fills the space, Ellie is imprisoned and cut off from Isaac. Ellie begs Isaac to shut the door so he and Carver may escape, since she can see no other way out. After Ellie's death, Isaac and Carver become furious and chase Danik fiercely, destroying the last few Unitologist soldiers in the process. They take the Codex from Danik and descend to the alien metropolis that has been buried, where they learn how to operate the machine. Danik and Ellie, who managed to escape the gas but were captured by Unitologist reinforcements, are waiting at the machine's center. If the Codex is not provided to him, Danik threatens to kill Ellie. The Codex is suddenly taken from Isaac by Carver, who believes in atonement, and thrown to Danik, who releases Ellie to catch it. Danik uses it right away to stop the machine, continuing the convergence event. When the incomplete necromorph moon leaves the machine's control and moves toward Tau Volantis, the planet's outer layers, under which the city and the machine are hidden, are immediately torn away. The ancient alien necropolis, which served as a tomb, a warning, and a protective seal against necromorphs, starts to fall apart as it ascends to be consumed. Danik ends up getting impaled and killed by a piece of falling debris while enthralled by his own success. Isaac bids Ellie farewell and sends her out in a shuttle after realizing there's no way to halt such an overwhelming force and make a secure escape. Isaac and Carver then work their way together to fight through the crumbling flying city to the Codex. They succeed in reactivating the machine while being sucked up into the planet-sized organism, setting it to reject convergence, which stops the event and sends the moon and the ruins of the alien metropolis crashing into Tau Volantis. Ellie laments the loss of Isaac, but finds comfort in the knowledge that the marker signal is no longer picked up by her ship's instruments. In a horrifying disaster, the necromorph moon is currently disintegrating as it approaches and combines with the planet. Ellie departs Tau Volantis' orbit and fixes her route for Earth. Following the credits, we hear Isaac calling out for Ellie, and then the sound of his breathing gear. Dead Space 3. Awakened. 2514. Isaac Clarke and John Carver are shocked to discover that they're still alive after falling to their near-death condition during the battle with Brother Moon over Tau Volantis. They then make their way across the surface of the frozen planet, discovering memories of the horror they'd experienced. They overcame more of the danger that Isaac and Carver had just encountered after learning that the marker signal was still triggering madness, suicide, and necromorphs. Then they learned that a Unitologist ship could return them to Earth. They noticed that the ship's shock point drive is missing after seeing a number of spacecraft take off. It can only reach the CMS Terra Nova. Once aboard the Terra Nova, Isaac and Carver must discover a means to restart the abandoned CMS Terra Nova's power system and locate a fresh shock point drive in order to make their way back to Earth. However, they come into the surviving members of the Circle who have taken refuge inside and started a new movement under the guise of the necromorphs in the corridors of the former Sovereign Colony's ship. Isaac and Carver uncover a new shock point drive, but Isaac is now going insane after dealing with members of the Circle and their own craziness. He objects to installing the shock point drive because, in his opinion, if they do, the Brethren moons will follow them to Earth and massacre everyone who lives there. Following a struggle between Isaac and Carver, the two of them experience another hallucination in which the Brethren moons disclose that they were just slowing down Isaac and Carver and that they have known the location of Earth all along. Isaac finally realizes that Carver was right all along after regaining his senses. He consents to putting the Terra Nova's shock point drive in. Carver then remembers that the audio logs had made a suggestion that the engine wouldn't be able to generate enough energy from the reactor to enter shock space and return to Earth. By dropping plutonium cores into the reactor after installing the shock point drive inside, they overload it and produce enough energy to reach shock space. After going back to the bridge, they start the spacecraft and head back to Earth. The Brethren moons have already arrived and begun their assault on Earth when they peer out of the Terra Nova's cockpit. As they try to speak with Earth, they start hearing broadcasts about necromorphs mowing down people. When one of the moons approaches the Terra Nova, it crashes into it and knocks Isaac and Carver down cold. It's unclear if this is a real event or just another hallucination. Unfortunately, the Dead Space story as we've known it for almost a decade has come to an end. However, with EA's newfound interest in the brand, we can only hope that another installment of this massive sci-fi horror epic will be released in the future. Since the Dead Space remake was revealed during the EA Play Live event, the developer has been revealing more information about the game, including their vision for it in comparison to the original and which parts they want to omit. In an interview posted on the EA website, Dead Space 2's art director, Mike Yazizian, mentioned that he was able to locate his old notebooks from that project, adding that it actually comes in handy seeing all the notes. Concept art, visual standards, source materials, notes from our interactions with them, and knowledge they picked up are all there in this document. All of it will be used in this game, he clarified. The game's creative director, Roman Campos Oriola, also made it clear that everything is being completely remade utilizing a new engine because this is a remake. It's being completely recreated in Frostbite, with all new assets, character models, and environments, even though those are based on the original concepts. There are new components, accessories, collision models, and other things. Although we're starting from scratch, the plot and structure will remain the same. Additionally, he talks about how the faster load times provided by the SSDs in the PS5 and Xbox Series XS will improve the experience. Our goal is to provide a completely uninterrupted experience. It'll be a continuous sequence shot from the start screen to the end, Campos Oriola explains. And if you've ever watched any interviews with Glenn Schofield talking about Dead Space, those were some of his exact same words when describing his vision for the game. Philippe Ducharme, a senior producer, discussed the game's volumetric events. The depth of a room and the thickness of the air can now be felt, he explained, rather than just being represented by sprites. We're using dynamic lighting and shadows, so in addition to affecting the mood and ambiance, it also affects gameplay because the player may modify the illumination in certain regions of the ship. With regard to how the Dead Space remake will be different from the original, Yazijian stated that the studio would do away with some features that don't work as well and make sure the game stays relevant to modern audiences, though he didn't elaborate. But he claims that the original Dead Space vision is the main source of inspiration. Out of respect for the original game, we take care to follow the plot, the graphic direction, and everything else. The Dead Space remake will be launched on the PS5, Xbox Series XS, and PC, even though no release date has been specified. Wow, what a journey. This video almost seems to be the culmination of all the work I've ever put into one of these story arcs or videos. Although extremely challenging, merging all of the diverse sources was eventually very satisfying. I want to thank you again for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, and be safe. Thanks, everyone.
There's still a way out for us. But we don't have much time.